Around this time, I believe is when my mom started doing pretty hard drugs like Xanax and things of that nature. And we got evicted from that apartment eventually, so we were going from like motel to motel. I was sleeping on the floor.
So we are with Brandon today. Brandon, why don't you start telling us your testimony?
First off, my childhood was pretty normal up to until I was like 7 or 8 years old. I had like a loving family and they were really nice. And then my parents ended up having a divorce, which I was the youngest at the time. So they were fighting custody over me mostly because I guess at that age I didn't have I wasn't old enough to choose who I wanted to go with or not. But I ended up staying with my dad for a while. And I was always in this constant battle in the middle of my parents. And so I would always have visits between my parents. But they both ended up seeing different people. And they also had children with those people that they were with. And so I have a lot of siblings now. But in this midst of the fighting, my dad ended up taking me out of state, which was against court order. And so my mom got full custody of me at that point. He took me all the way on the other side of the United States in West Virginia from California. And so my mom flew out and got me, and we flew back out to California. And at that time, she was staying in a homeless shelter called Lydia House, which is a really nice place. They had Bible studies and stuff. So, but we were in that shelter for a while, and then my mom was doing parenting classes, alcohol classes, so she can just stay on point, And then we ended up getting an apartment a little after. And during this whole time of this happening, I was always switching schools, so I didn't really have any friends. I was always the new kid. And during that time when my mom got that apartment, I would always ditch school and I would go to a public library and I would just chill at the library and read. But I was always ditching school, so I missed out on a lot of school. And then my mom got into a abusive relationship with someone. So her boyfriend was very abusive verbally and aggressively, physically, mentally, and all that. And around this time, I believe is when my mom started doing pretty hard drugs like Xanax and things of that nature. And we got evicted from that apartment eventually, so we were going from motel to motel. I was sleeping on the floor, and so I was always switching schools. I switched schools a couple of times then, and then we eventually were on a wait list for a low income apartment, and we got into that, and that was when I started high school, my freshman year. And at that time, I started smoking. I started smoking a lot of weed. I would smoke almost every day. If I had it, I would smoke it. But that's when I got into that habit. And around my sophomore year, my mom was still doing hard drugs. I believe she got into meth, but that's besides the point. At that time, a case was open and I was put into foster care. And so I was going back and forth between my mom and foster care. But then eventually I got permanently removed with no plans to go back. And so I went into a foster home and I stayed there for about a year. And I was still in sin, smoking. And then I AWOL'd to go see my mom. And when I went back to the old apartment that I used to live in, everything was really different. All the people around there were now vaping and just in really bad situations, and same with my mom and in the household and everything. So it was just still really bad. And so I saw that and I decided I can't stay here. I went back into the foster care. I walked into the DCFS office and was like, yo, take me back. But after that, I was put into a group home, and from then on, I aged out, basically. I turned 18, and I got this chance to move in with my little sister's foster parent, which she was eventually adopted by. But at this point, I was very selfish, hateful, frustrated, anger from my trauma or whatever. And I would always return just hate for people that have only shown love to me. And I would curse them out. I would do horrible things. I would avoid them. I would lock myself in my room or something. I would just stay away from all like interaction. And I started at that time to move in with my little sister. I quit smoking for around 8 months, and I was on my own. And during that time, I had really bad withdrawals. I would get nauseous and I would get dizzy. I would feel sick in the stomach sometimes. Like I would throw up. I would have to force myself to eat. And I fell back into smoking. And at that time, the foster parent of my mom didn't want me smoking because it's like a bad influence. And she didn't want that around my little sister, which is totally understandable. And so eventually I got kicked out and I had to move out. And I eventually moved in with my brother Mikhail. And at that time, he became a Christian and he was very on fire for the Lord. But I knew him before then in one of the foster homes I met, and he was way back deep into Satanism. And that was very moving to me because I knew him before that. And I see him now on fire for the Lord, praying, doing deliverance on people. And it was just very shocking to me seeing these things as I was still in the world. And eventually, I'm still smoking, and I eventually come to the Lord while I'm in my sin. I started reading, I started praying, and all these things, and I eventually get the strength to quit smoking. And during this time, when I quit smoking, when I quit smoking with Jesus, I had no withdrawals. I had no issues with it. It was easy, in fact, than when I did it on my own, which was really powerful to me because I struggled with trying to quit. And the most important part is I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't hateful. I wasn't lashing out onto loving people to me with hate. And it just brought me joy and really filled that like lostness I had, emptiness inside of me. And yeah, it was just very powerful to me. It moved me to be more loving because Jesus loved me first. And I couldn't love at all. I thought I could love before then, but it wasn't love at all. It was more hate. But even through all the trauma and everything, I was able to get through it because of Jesus. And I look back on it now and I kind of see it as all that trauma and whatever I went through eventually led me to the Lord. And I'm here now in my word. I pray, I go to church. And so yeah, that's basically it.
So Brandon, that's a powerful testimony. Now I'd like to hear, what are some plans that you have for your future now that you've given your life to Jesus Christ?
I definitely want to serve the Lord more. Maybe eventually go out and evangelize and spread the gospel. But also, I plan on going to college for nursing so I can eventually be able to help people in their health and whatever they may be going through. And if the moment arises, I can maybe point them to Jesus.
Any last words for people who are watching?
For anyone watching, I really encourage you to go read your word and ask the Lord for understanding of it. And that He loved you so much that you don't have to stop your sin to come to Him. You can come to Him how you are. No matter what you're in, how far deep you are into whatever you are, you can come as you are. And Jesus will reach His hand out and take you out of that.